Yeah.
I'm totally illiterate and technologically derelict or whatever. But no, you're talking about miscalculating fuel times. All air traffic is on Greenwich Mean Time. It never changes. So they don't pay attention to time zones or daylight saving or standard time. They don't do. It's all Greenwich Mean Time. So everybody flies on the same clock.
That's probably for the best.
24/7, 360.
Yeah. One less thing to screw up, you know.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm sure that was one of the first things they thought when they thought, okay, there's 24 time zones. We need to figure out a way around this, or these planes are just going to start crashing into each other.
Actually, there's places like Afghanistan that have half-hour time zones.
Yeah, when I went to India, I went 4.5 hours ahead. That was so weird for me.
Well, and what's really strange for me, and now that we're talking about this, because for those of you watching who don't know what the hell's going on, right before we came on the air, we were talking about daylight savings time, and and Chris here actually suggested that I do a 5 things video about daylight savings time. And well, here's the thing that has always bothered me about it, because I mean, I never even really considered the international implications of it, because I'm an ugly American and America is the only country that exists. But like in the United States, there are certain states that just ignore it.
Yeah,
you know,
I think Nevada is one of them.
Yeah, I think in Arizona maybe, where like they just don't
that's
do
what
it.
I was thinking.
Yeah, and it's like
Indiana has 3 different time zones sometimes.
Yeah, it's like, you see how this could be confusing? I mean, maybe 100 years ago, 150 years ago, you know, it made sense because
I think it was implemented in the 1930s.
Was it really?
Well, I think it was actually the Nazis who came up with it.
Well, there you go. Let's get rid of it.
Yeah,
we don't need that.
Just one point of order, Steve. If you look, and I posted the link to the Wikipedia article, it's daylight saving time, not savings time.
Oh,
if
sorry.
You put the second S on it, I might have. If you do a video on it, I might have to come up there and slap you.
Daylight saving. Well, we could have coffee afterwards. It would be great. Come up and slap the shit out of me. Then we go out for a nice lunch. Yeah. You know what's funny about that? That must be just an American linguistic affectation, because I've heard like European folks, British folks talk about daylight saving time, and I thought, oh, that must just be the posh way they say it. But apparently it's the way we should all be saying it, and I just have been completely ignoring that.
Apparently, Benjamin Franklin wrote an essay called An Economic Project for Diminishing the Cost of Light, in which he suggested jokingly that Parisians could economize candle usage by getting people out of bed earlier, making use of natural light. So the idea around it had been around for a while, but apparently, according to timeanddate.com, it was first used in Canada in 1908, and then Germany became the first country to use it in 1916 to minimize the use of artificial light to save fuel during World War I.
So we're going to need it again now that they've outlawed incandescent lights. Obama outlawing it.
So in Germany, it was pre-Third Reich. That's very important.
Yeah, it was 1916.
Goddamn Kaiser.
But the Canadians
were fucking Kaiser.
Yeah. But it was first used in Canada.
Well, okay. I mean, I understand. If we did it to copy Canada, I completely approve of that.
We're always copying the Canadians. They're so culturally influential.
Well, then we take credit for it. So everybody thinks Canada, whatever. But it's actually, we're taking all Canada's stuff.
Is it true that was it true that one of the quote-unquote founding fathers invented the metric system?
I don't know about that.
Benjamin Franklin.
That's huge. I doubt it.
That wasn't a song in Hamilton, so I don't know.
It seems very European, the metric system. So
yeah.
So it's Fahrenheit, but yeah.
Although wouldn't it be the most American thing ever if the metric system actually was invented by an American and then we didn't adopt it just to be stubborn?
Yes. Speaking of Hamilton, I watched the documentary and I can't get the damn musical out of my head now. I just keep walking.
I watched it.
I'm not gonna my shot.
I watched it.
I did that
me and
terribly.
Ashley watched it. Me and Ashley watched it last night. That was the first I had seen the documentary. Oh man, because I had been obsessed with the musical already. I've been listening to the soundtrack over and over again for months, and then I had kind of gotten away from it. I hadn't been listening to it as much, and now it's like right back in my head.
I have to pace myself, otherwise that earworm just will drive me bazonkers. He lives, he dies, he tells your story.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh God, that's so
damn catchy.
And here's just watching the documentary almost made me cry.
Oh,
because of thinking about how.
Yeah.
Oh, that to me is the secret of great art, especially like great narrative art, is if it breaks your heart, you know,
Yeah.
if it's sad. Francois Truffaut, whose name I just butchered, Francois Truffaut, once wrote that he always begins a film wanting it to be a comedy, and then partway through he realizes that only tragedy can save it. and I think that's so true. You know what I mean? Like, there's something about Hamilton that, okay, like Hamilton's really clever and really smart and really catchy and has some cool songs and some very good performances, but if it wasn't sad, because when you get to the end of it, it is so fucking sad. And if it didn't have that element to it, if it didn't have a very strong element of tragedy, I don't know if it would be connecting as much as it is. You know, it's not just that it's hey, look, it's a hip hop musical about the founding fathers. That's wacky, you know, but there's also this really deep, sad story at the center of it. And I think if it didn't have that, it wouldn't be nearly as, you know, effective.
Well, and
part of the reason. Oh, sorry, you go ahead, and then I just want to say something, but you go ahead first.
Oh, no, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say that Lin-Manuel Miranda, his humanity and his goodness and his true heart shines through in every verse of that. He just seems to be, somebody you just want to go up and hug him.
Yeah.
You just want to hug him.
Seems like such a nice guy.
He does. Doesn't he just seem like just a wonderful, gifted person? I'm just so glad that he's alive while I'm alive, so that I can appreciate him.
Yeah, I'm totally a Lin-Manuel Miranda fanboy. I'm right there with you. Christy, what were you going to say?
The thing that's great about Hamilton, and maybe the reason why it connects so deeply to you on the tragic level, I think, is because we don't really have tragedy anymore. We've stopped killing off our heroes in our plays and in our entertainment. If you think back to Shakespeare, you know, if you went to see a tragedy, you knew it was going to be a bloodbath. All of these people that you get emotionally invested in, they're all going to die at the end, or most of them, you know. And people went to have that experience because there is something about understanding our own mortality and seeing the span of a life, you know, within a play. And we've really gotten away from that. Our heroes live, our heroes win. So to actually see a per character that you get attached to die, and then knowing that loss and what could have been and feeling very in touch with that is, I think, more profound because it's so rare.
That's true. In more modern forms of narrative, like TV series or even movies, if you're talking about a series of movies, you know, heroes tend to live forever. It seems like life just goes on and on and on. You know, I mean, there's always going to be Batman. Batman's never going to die. You know, Superman's never going to die. They're always going to be making more. There's never going to be. I mean, maybe Wolverine's going to die in the next movie, but maybe not. You know what I mean? But yeah, having that sort of expectation of, okay, don't get too attached. You know, like, yeah, I know he's a great character now, but by the end he's going to be, you know, laying on a slab, and all the other characters are going to be gathered around talking about how great he was, you know.
They do kill off the villains though, which always irritated me.
Sorry,
the other
Jake,
thing I'll say about
say?
Hamilton. Oh yeah, Jake, go ahead, and then I'll say one last thing, and I'll be done on Hamilton. I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, but I know what you're saying, where I love a sad story, because part of it is, as you were saying, is so much of it is unexpected, or you don't know what to expect coming up. Where sometimes a happy ending, you're like, they feel like they just warp the plot all around just to try to make it a happy ending. But sometimes with a sad ending, it feels like the whole idea is just flowing a lot better.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe it's different with other people, but with me, like, it's a lot more difficult to make me sad than to make me happy. You know what I mean? Like, you can make me happy so easy. Like, if I think we're out of coffee and then it turns out we still have some, like that's all it takes. But to make me really deeply sad is kind of tough, because I'm generally a cheerful, optimistic person. And so when I watch a work of art that really gets me and makes me feel just sad for the characters, sad for what happens in the story. Like, to me, that's an achievement. That means that piece of art has really touched me. And I tend to really strongly rate, movies and TV series and books and et cetera, and songs that can really get that out of me, because I think it's a lot more difficult to extract or evoke that sad reaction. Christy, what were you going to say? One more thing about Hamilton?
Yes, and then I'll be quiet, because I just dominate this whole conversation.
We need to just do a Hamilton hangout.
There you go. The other thing that really brought out a difference to me in watching the documentary that was on PBS as well was, the cast of it is atypical to the men who were actually acting in history. Yeah. And I was reflecting the other day, what if Alexander Hamilton had been born a girl instead of a boy? We talk about this American dream where you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you can make something of yourself if you're clever and you work hard. But let's face it, unless you were of the right ethnic background and the right sex in Hamilton's day, if he had been born a girl, he probably would have died. There's no way he could have gotten the education or the opportunities to rise up in the military or to be elected. And so seeing the cast being so diverse shows the juxtaposition, I think, of that. Also, how far we've come, and yet how far we have left to go, because the structures that were in place when Hamilton started out have been reproduced over time, and we still carry the vestiges of those institutions and practices today. So the idea of the full American dream really has to be one for everyone, regardless of background, regardless of sex, because without it, it's just a very exclusive dream for a certain part of the population.
I think it would require an economic system entirely different than ones that we've invented so far.
Yeah, that would help, maybe. Well, maybe just a philosophy that didn't attach, capital value to every single thing, and the things that we don't attach capital value to are things that we just assume aren't important. You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah. That's the. Yeah, I was one more Hamilton thing for me, and then we'll talk about anything else. Because one of my favorite characters in the show and one of my favorite actors in the show is Christopher Jackson, who plays George Washington, and he now has a role on a TV show that I watch called Bull, which is awful. Don't watch Bull unless you expect to watch an awful show. But I watch it because it's entertainingly awful, and it's executive produced by Dr. Phil, and I have a guilty pleasure obsession with Dr. Phil. So Christopher Jackson plays this supporting role on Bull, and he plays like a fashion designer type guy, and he's really slick and really stylish, but his name is Chunk. And I think, why would they call the guy Chunk? That's just such an ignominious name. And we were watching the Hamilton documentary, and there was the scene of when they were performing at the White House, and Christopher Jackson as George Washington is singing that great song when he's saying goodbye as George Washington. And it's just a powerful performance where he's just singing his ass off. And it's this great song about George Washington stepping down from the presidency and moving on so that the nation can survive without him. And he finishes this song, and it's awesome. And I looked over at Ashley and I said, Chunk. Like, who looks at this amazing performer and says, I want him in my show, and he's going to play Chunk? But anyway, that's my last Hamilton story. Yeah, that's exactly the poor kid who was like the running fat joke in the Goonies, because that was like 30 years ago, where it was still acceptable to to regard like an overweight person as being inherently funny. Look at him. Look how much he eats. Isn't that funny? Yeah, I guess we're gonna feel weird about this in 30 years, though. You know that, right?
No, that's still one of the last bastions of mistreating people.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, yeah, you're right, because people on all political sides do it. Like, people still make fun of fat people, no matter what their persuasion. I don't like it when Jimmy Fallon makes fun of Chris Christie for being fat, because I'm like, okay, I don't like Chris Christie either. Chris Christie can walk off a bridge for all I care. But I mean, well, maybe he wouldn't be able to get onto the bridge though, because traffic would be stopped. But I mean, you don't need. But you don't need to make fun of the guy's weight. I mean, that has nothing to do with what makes him an asshole.
Well, can I give you some verbal whiplash here? Do you remember the Atlanta Olympic bombing? The young man who was initially fingered for that, and just the vile hatred that came out. His name was Richard something, and it was
Richard Jewell.
It was because he was chubby. And I remember watching Jay Leno that one night, and he used the F word, the fat word, and I'm fat. I'm as big around as a bowling ball, but he was so hateful toward him, Richard Jewell, and it was because he was fat. And then when they found out that he was innocent, they just kind of just like walked away from him. You know, they left a shattered man behind. You know. And,
I remember that.
But I think it was because he was. If he were like muscular and athletic, I don't think they would have gone after him as bad as they did.
No, it really does. It's kind of shocking when you think about it like that, and you put it in those terms. Like, this is a guy who at the time was suspected of setting off a bomb at the Olympics, and people made fun of him for being fat.
Yeah.
Like, what?
That made him doubly dastardly.
Yeah, it's like
bastard.
We think he's a terrorist, but he could lose some weight. I mean, let's focus on that.
It's almost like the people who still make fun of Donald Trump's hair.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like switch over to
and I mean, I've done that too. Like, I plead guilty to that, but it's like you sort of come to realize it's like, okay, he should be made fun of, and he should be mocked and ridiculed, but nothing about his hair or the size of his hands or none of that has anything to do with what makes him a prick. I mean, he would be a prick if he looked completely different. If he had, it's like nothing of that has anything to do with anything.
Well, I think making fun of his. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, to be fair, he's the one who keeps bringing up his hands and
well,
and
that's
having
true.
people touch his hair.
That's true.
I think the thing about making fun of his hands is, though, his reaction to that just underpins his childishness and his just ridiculous impetuousness.
Yeah,
so
and that side of his personality where, like, he feels like he has to keep boasting about stuff even if everybody knows it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if let's just say, I don't even know, let's just say his hands are smaller than average. Who gives a shit? But he keeps insisting that they're not, because that's really important to him. You know, and it's like, just let it go, dude. If nobody gives a shit about your hands, man. In fact, if you weren't threatening to, like, pull out of all our trade agreements and deport all the Mexicans, we probably wouldn't give you such a hard time about the hands. Like, if you just chilled out a little bit. Yeah. But so okay, a little over a week, and then it's over.
Yes.
I've already voted, so I don't care what happens in the next.
Oh, really?
Yes.
You're an early voter?
I'm an early voter. Although the early voting was crazy in Montgomery County. I don't know what it's like in your county.
No. I haven't. I always vote on election day, so I don't know. I haven't. And in fact, I think in Washington County there's only one early voting place, and it's in Hagerstown, and I haven't been by there recently since early voting started, so I don't know what the lines are like. But I mean, this part of Maryland is probably going to be heavily going for Trump. Not that it'll matter, because the rest of it'll be blue. And we're a winner take all state, so Donald can win 100% of Western Maryland, and it won't make a damn bit of difference because we're outnumbered by the rest of the state. But yeah, I'm not one of these people who is like waiting for the election to be over because I hate both candidates, because I don't hate both candidates. I think Hillary is fine. I mean, she wasn't who I voted for in the primary, but I don't see any reason to hate her or to be like, oh, I'm looking forward to voting for her. But just
email.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing, right? Speaking of the email stuff, right? If this were a normal election, I think the email thing would be a huge deal. Like, if Hillary were running against Mitt Romney, I think that would be a huge deal, and that would really, really be threatening her chances. But not this time. I mean, I remember like 2 or 3 weeks ago, the one of the first WikiLeaks stories broke on like the same day as the Access Hollywood tape from Donald Trump. And I was just like, hey, best of luck. Good luck. Like nobody cares about that at all. Nobody is even noticing. Oh, but Hillary gave a speech where she said she has a public and a private position. What about that? Yeah, no, we're just hang on. There's some other stuff going on over here. But yeah, but I'll be glad that it's over because I'll be glad when it's over because I'm just so sick of having like some of the most obnoxious and toxic people in the country get time on the evening news. Like that's been the worst part of the election to me is, and again, like me and my wife were talking about this the other day about how, the things that Trump says and the things that Trump's surrogates say when they go on TV to defend him or to argue his position. It's the kind of stuff that I remember reading in like junior high school and high school, like in the early days of the internet, like on Usenet in these little sub forums where like there were 20 people there and they were all talking about how Bill Clinton was a murderer and a cokehead and blah, blah, blah. And the kind of shit that people used to write in, photocopied newsletters that they wrote in their basements and handed out in front of the DMV. I mean, it's just like fringe, crazy stuff. And it's at the forefront of a presidential campaign. Like that's embarrassing to me as an American. And when I look at like, when I talk to friends in other parts of the country or other parts of the world, and they're like, what is going on over there? Like you've got a former senator and secretary of state running for president against the guy from The Apprentice, who's like a huge racist and conspiracy theorist. Like,
and he's actually being taken seriously. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's at worst going to finish second. Like, what the fuck is going on?
I drove back
so I'll be
home.
glad when all that's over.
I was saying I drove back home a couple of weekends ago, and it was surprising that once I got past Frederick, just how it turned into Trump country, and it scares me for whatever's going to happen with those people after the election. And what scares me more is how the country's going to burn on the 9th, because remember the guy who the Trump supporter who was on TV saying, whenever someone would come up with a statistic, he would just say wrong. He would just say, prove it, show me what numbers, what polls. That's what Trump's going to do on the 9th. So, what are we going to do?
Yeah, I'm hoping that the result will be lopsided enough that people outside of that really hardcore Trump supporter bubble will all just sort of realize that it's nothing, and they'll just be like, yeah, okay, whatever.
They're just really good at rigging it.
Yeah. She didn't steal the election by that much. Okay. Like, if Hillary gets like, if Hillary gets like over 310 electoral votes, like to me, okay, that's not a rigged election. Like she didn't rig it that much, if it's close, if it goes down to the wire and it's like, 270 something to 260 something, then, maybe Trump could get some people to believe like, oh, there was irregular voting in this county in Florida, blah, blah, blah. But if it's like a blowout, like a lot of polls seem to forecast that it will be, I think that if Trump does decide to be like, oh, she stole the election, it'll be him and like a very small percentage of his base that'll be hanging on to that. And everybody else will realize, oh, okay, they're nuts.
He can bring back the bottle.
Based on early voting and in-person, like absentee and in-person voting, the Democrats are doing a very good job of turning people out. And I saw an estimate that up to 40% of the ballots cast in this election might be done before election day. So, she's got a better operation. She's got professionals in the field. They've identified their supporters, and they're in a good position to get people over, independents to say, look, she's sane. So I'll vote for the sane candidate. That's my bare minimum, but I'll still vote for the sane candidate.
And Hillary can actually afford to lose all but like 1 or 2 swing states and still win.
She has so many paths to 270.
Yeah.
I just gave a talk about this last week. So
yes, Trump needs to win all of the swing states. Plus, I think doesn't he also need to at least flip like one traditionally blue state? I mean, his path to the majority of the electoral college is so unlikely
On election night, keep your eye on Florida and North Carolina. Pennsylvania is already out of reach for him. He would need to flip Pennsylvania too. But when Clinton wins either or both Florida and North Carolina, the night's over pretty much. So, speaking of which, I will be doing a live stream on election night with Will Fox. He's going to come to Cologne. And Steve, I want to invite you to come on air if you want to. Sorry, I'm not going to invite anybody else here, but I know that was really
just me, baby.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we're going to chat and wait for the returns to come in.
I would love to do that.
It'll be special.
I'm used to it.
Mama Christie has a favorite.
I would have to say at this point for me, I'm less concerned about the presidential races, but there's a lot of smaller races in my area that are phenomenally important, and it's going to be. Yeah, I'm really worried about them, especially state senate, because we literally have like a fairly decent Democrat running for re-election, but people disagree with him on one issue, and they're burning him for it. Against the Republican challenger is going to be a rank and file, and it's really worrying me.
Yeah. Those are the most important things too. Like I know we have in Maryland, in my district, we have thankfully a Democrat member of Congress. Thanks mostly because our district includes a little bit of sort of off to the east where there's enough progressive voters to vote in a Democrat, but for years we had a Republican, and now also all of my state representatives, my delegate and my state senator have been Republicans for years, and they're just worthless. I mean, they're just my state senator is a guy who made his priority in his first term like anti-gay bills and anti-trans bills, and I mean, it's just a nightmare. It's just they're the most worthless people you can imagine having in your government.
With my U.S. representative, it seemed like every time Obama did something, I could probably type out what he was going to say and be pretty close. Mm-hmm. It was just like the same right-wing rhetoric you always hear, and that was the only thing that would ever come out with him. And it was like anytime he tried to get anything done, it was usually he was trying to smuggle it into another bill that had something like completely unrelated. It was just like, some of the bullshit politics you see sometimes.
Yeah. That's one of the enduring sources of shame that I have in my state, Idaho, is they were doing the budget thing in the Constitution. We have to balance the budget, but they couldn't find money to continue funding a program that got medication for cystic fibrosis sufferers, I believe it was, but basically life-threatening. If they don't get their medicine, they're going to die. But they could find money to join a class action lawsuit against Obamacare.
Jesus Christ.
Which they stated in the same program they did not expect to win.
Well, at least they have their priorities sorted, right?
Yeah.
And Jacob, what state are you from?
Idaho.
Jacob.
Oh, sorry.
No, we have Idaho, we have a Maryland. I'm from Tennessee, and Jacob, where are you from? You were talking about
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. You were worried about your local, your state legislature. Okay. Thank you.
There's so much Republican-funded pointless investigations of Clinton, of joining onto lawsuits like the one, or passing laws that are unconstitutional and then appealing when they're thrown out by a federal judge. I mean, the Republicans are too incompetent to manage government. They just ruin it. I mean, look at Brown back in Kansas. Yeah. He implemented trickle down, and all it did was destroy the state's economy. They're useless. They need to, and this is what I'm hoping that the Bernie movement. It's not enough to win the presidency. You have to win up and down the ballot, and the enthusiasm and energy that people put into his candidacy, I would hope they would take forward into finding progressive candidates and backing them in primaries and then in the general.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Trump will depress the Republican vote enough that they just stay at home, win everywhere.
Please, yeah. I mean, I've been keeping an eye on the map for the Senate, and according to 538, like the Democrats have a decent chance of winning a majority in the Senate. this year, which would make me just as happy as if Hillary won the presidency. Not really a shot at taking back the House. The House is still sort of out of reach this time.
Pennsylvania's going to be close. We have a Senate seat up. It's going to be close.
If there are Trump
unfortunately,
voters,
I think what's going to kill us in Pennsylvania is the Democratic turnout has not been good.
Yeah,
you know, it's like
Trump. Oh, so go ahead. If the Trump voters go and don't vote down ticket because they don't want to support establishment people like Paul Ryan, that will eat into the number of votes he gets or any Republican gets. And if the party people go out and vote for the rest of the ticket but not Trump, that should depress the number that he gets. So there might be divisions of ticket splitting within the Republican Party for candidates based on whether they're alt-right or establishment or evangelical. And that might overall help Democrats, pick up some House seats. But I agree with Steve that the House is kind of out of reach, but the Senate, we've got a good shot. In terms of Democratic turnout, it kind of depends on where you're looking. There are places like Georgia, for example, and also Nevada, where you're seeing really diverse populations and younger people turning out to vote in early voting and absentee. So yeah, it's not just election day, but Democrats definitely have a harder time. Well, we work harder to turn our base out in presidential years than we do in other years, and then we pay for it in off presidential years.
Yeah. That's like the blessing and the curse of the way the Democratic Party has run elections over the last several cycles. Is that when voter turnout is high, Democrats tend to do very well. But when voter turnout is low, Republicans tend to do very well because the Republican Party has, and I think you can see this in some of the policies that they propose and some of the laws that they try to get passed. Republicans try to suppress the vote. Democrats try to get the vote out to as many people as possible.
It's how they try to implement things as well. There's a lot of talk in North Carolina. And people are still, on the left and the right, are still pretty sore about how the bathroom bill, which is not just a bathroom bill, went through in the middle of the night, and they just pushed it through and refused to consider when people were like, well, what about this on it? I don't like that. What about this on it?
Yeah.
So hopefully there'll be a big turn there.
I think there needs to be a brand new tone of voice for the get out the vote, because you have like two get out the vote messages. One is, not get out the vote. One is your vote doesn't matter, it's all rigged. The other is, you fucking traitor, you didn't vote, fuck you. And that's not really constructive either.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to find the best way to do that because, I mean, you don't want to push people too hard because then they might start to resent you and they'll be like, well, I don't have to vote if I don't want to. The cops aren't going to come and drag me to the polls, But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but it's super important. Like you really should. If you can do it without hardship, you should do it. Because there are people in this country who should vote or should be able to vote who aren't able to, because they can't get off work or because they can't find a ride to the polling place or for some other reason, or because they live in a state with some bullshit voter suppression law where they have to show ID and they don't have ID. There's all kinds of people in this country who should be able to vote who can't. So if you can, and it's easy, you should really do it, but it's hard to figure out like a succinct way to send that message to people without feeling like, you're haranguing them, like, go vote, you lazy bastard.
Now, it won't matter this election, but what are you guys' thoughts about the process of it? I live in Oregon, and you mail in your ballot. They mail it to you, and so you have to have everything updated with them. You don't have to show anyone ID or anything, but you have to have things updated with the state as far as where you live. They mail it to you, and you can mail it back or drop it off, which is kind of nice, because then you don't have to take time off of work. Or, I don't know, there has to be some way to make it a little easier. It won't happen this election, obviously, or either a day off for everybody, one day off for
a week off.
Yeah,
voting week.
Yes.
Sure.
Do you want to hear from the political scientist on this one?
Please.
No.
Well, there's
no, we're American. We don't need expertise.
Yeah, like it's part of the university conspiracy. Yeah, there's a lot of ways that different countries encourage voting. In the UK, basically, if you move into an address, they'll contact you and say you need to get on the electoral register. And I had to fill out a form in the UK saying I don't have to be on the electoral register because I'm not a citizen. That kind of one-on-one contact doesn't happen with county clerks in the US. Other countries have their elections on a weekend, on a Saturday, or they make it a day where it's a national holiday, so everyone is off of work. And yeah, Americans' system is really complicated. This idea, like in Florida and other states where you have to register like a month before the election in order to be eligible for the election, all of these things are obstacles that can easily be overcome. The problem is that the elections are run by the states. There isn't a federal election system. And if we had a federal election system with something like along the lines of, if you can show ID, whether it's a student ID or a photo ID for driving, you can register and vote the same day. If we had uniformity or an option like Oregon does with postal voting, then we could see real increases. I mean, the American turnout is among lowest in the Western world. But we also have a lot of elections. Yeah. We have a lot of offices. We have off-year elections. We have state elections. We even vote for sometimes coroner or DA. So the number of votes that an American has in any 4-year period is, in the UK, you might vote in a general election every 5 years, and for a while that was it until they started having other elections. So the number of elections, spring elections, fall elections, even year elections, all of it ends up getting, I guess, some kind of voter fatigue, because you can't simply know everything about your town board members when you're, casting your vote. So those are usually personal relationships and things along those lines. So, yeah.
Certainly not by listening to anything any of them says.
Well, when it comes to like municipal garbage collection and the cost of the contracts, that's not something a lot of people want to get into the details of. They're quite happy to pay somebody to make those problems go away for them, in the form of like a small stipend to be in the local town council or town board.
Yeah, I think there are certain states, not very many at the moment, but that do automatic voter registration. Where every system is different, but where basically if the state has your information and can verify that you live in the state and you're eligible to vote in that state, then they automatically register you. Like, you don't have to go down to the DMV and say, I want to register to vote. They automatically do it and just send you your registration card and say, here's your information. Here's your polling place. Here's where you go vote. I don't see why that shouldn't be the standard around the country. I mean, because when you think about it, if voting is a civil right and one of the most coveted rights in society, why should you have to go down to an office and fill out a form or send in a paper, fill out a form on a website to say, yeah, I want to be able to exercise my basic civil right? Like, if the state knows that you exist, you should be on the voter rolls automatically.
Actually, come to think of it, Steve, I'd like to thank you for crystallizing the idea in my mind of you can't have a referendum on things like gay marriage because it's a civil right. It's not that kind of a thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why we have constitutions. That's why we have a rule of law, because there are certain things that we have decided shouldn't be up to popular vote. Or at the very least should be incredibly difficult to change at the popular whim, should require some kind of a super majority or have to go through some really difficult process. You shouldn't be able to just throw it up on the ballot and say, should gay people be allowed to, be first-class citizens? Like that seems incredible. 51% of the people.
To make it even worse, in Pennsylvania, we have a referendum this fall where the wording on the ballot is really confusing as to what it actually means. And there's been a lot of Facebook posts going, here's what it actually means. This is what you should vote if you want this or this, because they've really vaguely worded what they're talking about.
Yeah, we had that problem a few years ago in Maryland. One of those anti-gay, anti-trans bills that was put up as a ballot measure by one of my local representatives, my state delegate. It was the same thing, where like the wording was so convoluted and ambiguous. It was like, okay, wait a minute, do I want to vote for this or against this? you know, and
for us, it's they want to raise the mandatory retirement age for judges from 70 to 75, but the wording on the ballot doesn't mention that there's already a mandatory age at 70. It just says, do you want a mandatory age of 75? And people think it leaves you to think there isn't already one.
Yeah.
And what they probably want to do is keep more conservative judges on the bench longer.
Yeah, that's probably it. I listened to last week's This American Life a couple days ago, and they had a story about in Georgia. There's like an effort to change the Georgia council that sort of oversees judges in the state, and it's completely separate from the legislature. It's sort of its own independent thing, and they are charged with investigating and sanctioning judges who are found to have acted inappropriately. And it's been this great system. Like, they've had it for 40 years, and it's been great. They've gotten a lot of bad judges off the bench, and you know, it's you can't imagine why they'd ever want to change it. And the Republicans in the state legislature want to change it to give the legislature a lot more direct power to tamper with it and to fuck with it. And it's one of those things where it's like, why would anybody want to do this? Except
is that even
reasons.
Constitutional for Congress to get involved in the judicial system like that?
Yeah. Well, with separation of powers.
It's a state system, so
you're talking about serious separation of power issues there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, what I was talking about was a state system, but it's this. I mean, you can imagine, like, if Congress tried to pass something similar to give them a lot more sway over, like, the Supreme Court. You know what I mean? If Congress said, hey, we want a constitutional amendment that says every 2 years we get to nix one of the justices. Yeah. You know, like, wait a minute. Whoa, hang on a second.
I think all you need to do there is have someone with standing sue and then send it to the court, and the court can go, no, just like they did in Mayberry versus Madison. Going, no, you're exceeding your authority. We're going to stay the way we are.
The court's going to rule, no, we're still in charge.
Exactly. And on that, I'm going to have to leave because I've got to hang out in 15 minutes. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. Sorry for my interruptions, but I had some really, I was excited and wanted to get in there. So.
A stimulating addition.
You are always welcome, Chris.
Thanks. All right, I'll talk to you guys maybe next month. See you shortly, Matthew. Bye.
So I have to say, sometimes the Republicans trying to get involved in the judicial system doesn't always work in their favor. Like, the best example of that is here in Pennsylvania. They got we have this district judge, Jones. He was appointed to the bench by George W. Bush, mostly thanks to his ties to Tom Ridge. Yep, that was the judge. He was appointed by George W. Bush, close ties to Tom Ridge and Rick Santorum. And yet he ruled on Kitzmiller versus Dover and overturned the same-sex marriage bans in Pennsylvania. So sometimes you can still get a judge with integrity.
Yeah. Well, like, he's not been my favorite, but even like Chief Justice Roberts on the Supreme Court, he was the deciding vote in the case a couple years ago that upheld Obamacare. You know, and I remember at the time, it was so delicious hearing all the conservatives, like, you know, just, I can't believe Robert sold us out, you know. And I just thought, he was your guy.
Yeah.
Your guy, your president put him in there. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I know.
You know?
I kind of wonder, the recent increases in premium costs cannot be legitimate. Surely.
Yeah, I mean, I heard some people say that that's this, like, you sort of expect that because the insurance companies are, like, a lot of the plans that they're selling on state exchanges, they're selling at a loss, but they're selling them because they have to, because the law requires them to make that coverage available, and that it'll take a few years to sort of sort that out, so that, you know, so the insurance companies can still figure out a way to make money on you while they're covering your health care. I mean, it's the whole private insurance system is just so messed up, you know, that the fact that that we're even in that situation where it's like, well, the premiums are going to go up for a few years until they can figure out a way to bring them down while still making money off of you. You know, it's like, the whole notion of healthcare being a for-profit business just rubs me the wrong way.
And I don't pretend to understand or know anything about anything, but that never stopped me from commenting. But in Tennessee,
Right, please.
I can tell you in Tennessee, we have a Republican governor who has blocked the exchanges, and I think that's also the case in 30 other states where the Republican governors have blocked and impeded and handicapped the exchanges to create this exact scenario where there's a lack of competition, there's a lack of free enterprise or whatever. They want to strangle it from the ground up, and I don't understand how they're doing it, but they're doing it in Tennessee. The governor would not allow money to come into extra Medicare and Medicaid, and also he restricted the number of insurance companies that could compete. And that's
people are going uninsured because it has Obama cooties on it, basically.
Yes,
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the same thing behind all of these failed attempts in Congress to vote for these bills that would repeal Obamacare. They knowing that even if it passes, Obama's going to veto it.
Yeah.
But yet they continue to waste time and
on top of that, whenever Trump proposed his sort of alternative to Obamacare, it was literally 75% Obamacare.
Yeah.
It's like, so why don't you just work on the stuff you disagree with? And there's plenty of room for debate in this as far as the individual policies, but they just want this. They've come in with this all or nothing approach.
Exactly. And the glaring fact that it's the same as what Republicans had put up, 8 years ago.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
And I can remember. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I can remember when Obama was championing the whole thing, and he invited a whole bunch or all of the opposition into a sort of C-shaped table, and he kept saying, let's start with what we agree on. What do we agree on? And each of mostly Tea Partiers began with a line of rhetoric. Like one guy kept pointing to this pile of papers and blah, 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 nothing to do with anything about agreement. It was all just rhetoric. And he said, what do we agree on? Rhetoric. What do we agree on? Rhetoric.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's been the party line for Obama's entire administration. I mean, the day after the guy was elected, you had Republicans coming out saying we're not gonna let him do anything. Mm-hmm. We're gonna stop him at every turn. And the guy he wasn't even in office yet. He hadn't named a single member of his cabinet. He hadn't announced any particular goals or policies, and they were like, we're going to stop him. He's the most liberal, radical president we've ever had. And he wasn't even president yet.
Well, hell, we're a week away from the final election, and Ted Cruz is already saying we're going to investigate her from the get-go, and we're not going to let her do any. And that's a week out still.
Yeah. They spend the whole time trying to derail everything and then act surprised when it's a train wreck.
Yeah. Well, I know Jon Stewart used to make that point on The Daily Show all the time, that Republicans would sabotage the government and then run for re-election on the premise that government doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no shit, it doesn't work.
Basically.
You just flattened all the tires. Like, of course it doesn't work. Yeah, but I mean, if there's a bright side to that, it's that hopefully enough people are starting to realize that that's the deal, that the Republican Party, at least as a national political force, is really going to start falling into decline, especially after Trump. Like, if Trump loses and loses big, I think that will be kind of a watershed moment, not for the party itself, because I think the Republican Party has its head so far up its ass. I don't think even if Trump gets completely clobbered, I don't think it's really going to get through to them, because Romney losing didn't get through to them at all. That Romney lost, and they did a post-mortem, and they said, we need to appeal to Hispanics and women, and then they nominated Donald Trump for the very next presidential election. So, but I do think that eventually, like the party's influence will start to really, really fall, and it will either be forced to change, or some other conservative but more reasonable, rational party will sort of, materialize to take its place. And hopefully it won't be as obstructionist. You know what I mean? Like there'll still be divides between right and left, but there will at least be some ability to reach a consensus and move forward on things that both sides can agree on.
Yeah.
And actually, Hillary could be a president to pull them together if they would listen to her for 5 seconds.
Yeah, well, because
I like war. You like war.
Exactly. See, I was talking about that. I was talking about that the other night. Like with me and Ashley were talking about it, because it's the same thing with Obama. If you listen to Obama's critics from the left and Obama's critics from the right, it's like they're talking about two completely different people. Yeah. And Hillary's the same way. If you listen to Hillary's critics on the left and you listen to like Democrats who aren't super comfortable with Hillary, they talk about how hawkish she is. They talk about how they're afraid she'll get us involved in more wars. They talk about how, she's not their number one choice to keep like a close, firm hand on Wall Street. And I mean,
she's a moderate Republican is what I hear a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I don't agree with that, but they're at least talking about someone who is like a recognizable person. You look at Hillary Clinton, you think, oh yeah, she gave all those speeches to Wall Street, and yeah, she talks about regulating Wall Street now, but maybe that's just because Bernie Sanders kind of, pulled her in that direction and said,
speaking complete sentences, which Donald Trump cannot.
Yeah, but like you listen to people on the right talk about Hillary, and they don't criticize her for her hawkishness because they don't have a problem with that, because if she bombed, she could bomb Arab people into oblivion and they wouldn't care because they don't give a shit. But they talk about all this stuff that is just is like she's a criminal. She shouldn't even be allowed to run. And it's like she has actual policies and proposals and beliefs that you guys could be criticizing, but instead you're just like, she's the worst person in the world.
It's like World Wrestling Federation there. Not that I'm not dishing the World Wrestling people though, because I know you like that.
How dare you speak about wrestling?
Wouldn't it be great if all WWE promos for a while just turned into policy debates?
I'm going to take that Great Barrier and push it.
The way that you implemented the Tower of Doom there, it's just one of the best.
Yeah, right.
I'd vote for The Rock every time.
Rock says America is a nation of immigrants. Yeah, that would be funny.
And what was the name of the man? I'm giving you whiplash here again. I'm sorry. The name of the man who was a wrestler for many, and he had many different personas, but he pushed the tooth out his nose.
Mick Foley. Mankind, Mick Foley.
Mick Foley. Man, now that dude was tough as nails. I'd vote for him for president too. Let me tell you.
And just like you were saying earlier about Lin-Manuel Miranda, Mick Foley, from everything I can tell, just seems like a super nice guy. Like way too nice to be a wrestler.
And too smart too. Probably.
Yeah, especially a wrestler who worked his style, because he was so hard hitting and he would like do elbow drops like onto the concrete floor and the guy would move out of the way. I mean, just ridiculous stuff. Yeah, had one of his ears torn off in a match, busted out his teeth. He had a tooth go up the roof of his mouth and out of his nose.
Yes,
burned by a C4 explosion.
Really?
Yeah, burned by a C4 explosion. Huh?
Yeah.
What did you say, John?
I must. Oh, sorry.
I was saying, did this really happen, or is it just wrestling?
Oh no, it really happened.
It really happened.
It really happened. Yeah. Yeah, it was not.
Japan is crazy.
Yeah, but he seems like such a super nice guy in real life, and it's just like, God damn, like, how did you end up as this guy?
And didn't he occupy like 4 or 5 different characters? I mean, he was Mankind, and then he was something else. He was
originally Cactus Jack, and then he was Mankind, and then he was Dude Love, and then he's also wrestled just as himself, just under his own name as Mick Foley. And and it's like, it's weird when you see him as himself out of the wrestling environment. And he seems like just such a nice, low key guy, and smart and funny, and just sort of like an everyday sort of fellow. And it's like, God. And like 15 years ago, he was backstage saying, okay, now, and after you backdrop me onto the table covered in thumbtacks, I'm going to hit you with the barbed wire covered baseball bat. It's like,
well, actually,
wow.
I think it was after his Hell in a Cell match. He was like sitting in a hot tub with thumbtacks sticking out of him going,
oh, no.
He was like, did we do the tax? And they're like, yeah. And he goes, oh, good. And he's like,
did we miss the tax spot?
Like,
no, we got it.
And he's like, oh, good. I was hoping we'd do that.
Yeah. Yeah, we did it, Mick. See? We did it.
Oh, no.
I would definitely recommend his autobiography. It was probably one of the best ones I've ever read, because it felt like you really felt his personality in the book, which is what I think a lot of autobiographies are missing, that because they're more professionally written by ghostwriters, where you lose the personality of the person who's you're reading about. Where Foley, like, he hand wrote the first draft, and you could it feels like as you're reading it, he's just sitting there talking to you, just telling his life story over a couple of beers. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to get that, because that thank you. I didn't even know he wrote a book. Thank you.
Yeah. I guess that will be his first one. Have a Nice Day.
Yeah. It's very informally written. It's very easy to read.
Yeah. It's a quick read, even though it's a huge book.
Yeah.
Like, it's a massive. If you get like the hardcover, it's like that thick. But it's a pretty quick read, because he is a really sort of informal writer.
Oh my.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think, that the success of his books are actually what enabled him to sort of take a step back and retire, because because the first book especially was like a huge bestseller, and he could sort of afford to be like, hey, I don't have to, have people smack me in the face with chairs every night to pay the bills.
I think he was doing like like some sort of news interview about it, and I think he was doing one with like Hulk Hogan and like a couple other big name wrestlers. And he said, I got to tell you, I probably made more off this book than all of us here combined in wrestling.
Yeah. Which, I mean, and if Hogan was there, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. And it might not have been Hogan, but but he was, all the wrestlers were sitting there nodding like, yeah, we didn't really make shit off of wrestling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but it is kind of amazing when you think about, if you compare wrestling to athletes in like legitimate sports. I mean, there are a handful of wrestlers at the very top who make a lot of money, but I mean, it's nothing compared to like baseball money. I mean, at his absolute peak, I think Hulk Hogan had a contract in the last years of WCW where he was making something like $4 million. And it was like a 4-year contract. So he's basically making $1 million a year guaranteed, which is a huge amount of money. Right. But I mean,
comparatively,
to be the top guy in your business, only making that much.
Yeah, exactly. He was making the most out of anybody. And you look at the top contracts for ball players, and it's not even in the same universe.
That's basically minimum wage in baseball.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, $1 million a year is like what they sign you if you're a hot prospect out of college.
But the McMahon family's raking it in, though, right?
Yeah. Oh shit, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But I tell you what, wrestling sells lots and lots of tickets, so they should be making more.
It's still pretty popular, yeah. I mean, it's still pretty popular, and they do so much. Like there are so many. They do. I know WWE does like 5 shows a week, and they do the Monday and Tuesday are TV, and then they do the rest of the week just live events at places around the country, and yeah. I mean, it's a rough life. If you think about like a baseball player during baseball season might play 5-6 games a week, which is a really tough schedule, but it's half the year. Whereas wrestlers wrestle 5 or 6 days a week, all year round.
All year round. Which I live in Memphis. It's ground zero,
Oh yeah, man, you're in Lawler country.
Yeah. The king resides not too far from here.
Absolutely.
For seeing the long-term exposure, just look at the Undertaker.
Yeah, I think he might finally be done. I think he might finally be ready to hang it up. He's just so beat up, and he's in his 50s, and he's like 6'9" or 6'10". It's like, dude, just go home.
And when McMahon's son fell off of the cage. I just had this image of his torso bursting and his head just flying into the audience.
Wouldn't it have been so much better if that was one of Donald Trump's kids? Like, instead of Shane McMahon coming back, just hey, let's get Donald Trump Jr. out here. Let the Undertaker throw him off the top of a cage.
I think
Shane is actually cool.
About the same. Yeah. Oh no.
Yeah, Shane is cool. Yeah, from what I hear, you know.
Actually,
Look at that. We spent the last 10 minutes of the Patreon hangout talking about wrestling. Who would have imagined that?
I'm sorry.
You're not sorry.
No, please, thank you. I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry.
I haven't watched it recently, but I watched a lot like before I went off to college. Then it was like at college, I didn't have TV for the first 2 years, and I haven't been able to get back into TV yet since.
Yeah.
If you'll indulge me one last thing, perhaps you'd appreciate this. There was a 1980s theme open mic a few months ago, or a month or two ago, and I was dressed in a long black cassock, a long coat, nice black fedora, not a trilby, a fedora, and I had them play the Undertaker theme and turn the lights on stage blue, and I came up with this scythe.
Nice.
Oh.
And I did a promo as HIV, calling out Reagan for saying that I was a exclusively homosexual virus.
Wow.
I
do appreciate that.
Don't believe him. Awesome. I'm coming for all of you, or rather, you're coming for me.
Wow. I like that. Anytime you can cross-reference pro wrestling with an anti-Reagan promo is you've got me. You've got me. It's like, yeah, Reagan was a great president as long as you weren't gay or homeless or, you know, a working person or black or a woman. Yeah.
I actually heard Jerry DeWitt say on his podcast a couple weeks ago, he's like, he talks about this concept of what he calls AmeriGod.
Yeah.
It's just like, you know, he goes, it's the only way you can have people from all different denominations of deeply divided sects, you know, put on a bumper sticker that says God and guns. Because they're talking about they're really talking about a completely different God every time. But there's this sort of concept of what he likes to call AmeriGod as like this sort of combined notion of Christianity and politics. And he said, if that's the case, then its last great prophet was Ronald Reagan.
Mm.
And he actually said that. He's like, their prophet was Reagan.
Oh, definitely. And just like probably most of the biblical prophets, you know, the conception and the perception of Reagan that people have now is mostly just made up. You know, I mean, there's a little nugget of truth at the bottom of it, but this image of Saint Reagan as the great leader is basically just imaginary.
Absolutely.
You know, because I mean, I'm pretty sure the guy fell asleep during cabinet meetings.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Full of jelly.
I don't think Abraham Lincoln fell asleep during cabinet meetings.
Either that or Reagan was consulting his astrologist.
Yeah, he was consulting his astrologist.
But I guess the thing that we can be grateful for is that Donald Trump did slay Ted Cruz, because he is evil personified, I think, and he put him off for at least 4 more years.
Well, and hopefully he put him off for longer than that, because Cruz fucked up and endorsed Trump. I mean, if Cruz had not endorsed Trump and had remained like sort of the guy standing off to the side, I mean, then in 4 years, maybe he could have come forward and said, I warned you all about Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And you didn't listen to me. But now he can't do that.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Well, folks, it is after 1 o'clock. We've been going for an hour. It's time to wrap this up. Sadly, I could go on for a while yet, but I have shit to do, and I'm sure you guys do as well. Thank you all for joining me. Those of you who are in the room and who have been in the room throughout the hour and had to leave, I appreciate so much spending this hour with you every month. And thanks to all of you for supporting my Patreon campaign. I appreciate it more than I can even tell you. And to all of you watching who are patrons, thank you so much. To those of you who are watching who are thinking about becoming patrons, it would be great if you would. If you can afford it, if you think I'm worth it, you can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to support this channel and these videos that I make for as little as $1 a month or whatever you think I'm worth, really. And we do this every month. We have a live Patreon hangout every month where everybody can watch, but the patrons can jump in and join in on the fun. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I hope you guys in the room with me enjoyed participating. And we'll do this again next month. So if you're an American, go vote. And if you're not an American, don't be too hard on us. Some of us are trying really hard.
Cover.
Cover, yeah. Hold your breath for another week, and then hopefully it'll be over. So thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next month.